Hello from the underground. Continuing with Balzac's �𝐥𝐝 on page 105. It was 5 o'clock. Eugene was hungry, and he was afraid he would be late for dinner. This made him feel the comfort and convenience of being carried quickly across Paris, but the purely physical pleasure left his mind free to struggle with the thoughts that assailed it. Contemptuous treatment flicks a young man of that age on the raw. He flies into a rage and shakes his fist at society in general. He is determined to avenge himself, yet his self-confidence is shaken. Rastignac now could think of nothing but the words, "You have shut the Countess's door against you." "I shall call on her," he said to himself, "and if Madame la Basson is right, if I am refused admittance, Madame Ristaud should meet me in every drawing room on the street she enters. I will learn to fence and practice pistol shooting. I will kill her Maxime for her." "And what about money?" cried his conscience. "Where will you get that from?" At once there shone before his eyes the wealth displayed at the Comtesse de Ristaud's mansion. He had seen there the luxury which that Mademoiselle Goriot was bound to love, the gilding, the expensive objects prominently displayed, the undiscriminating splendor of the newly rich, the senseless extravagance of the courtesan. This fascinating picture was eclipsed by a sudden vision of the imposing Hôtel des Bastions. As his imagination soared among the giddy heights of Parisian society, 1,000 dark thoughts stirred in his heart. His views grew broader and his conscience slacker. He saw the world as it is, saw how laws and moral judgments are without power among the rich, and found in success the ultima ratio mundi. "Vautrin is right. Success is virtue," he told himself. When he reached the Maison Vauquer, he ran upstairs to get 10 francs to give the coachman, and then went into the nauseating dining room, where he found the 18 guests feeding like animals at a trough. This lamentable room, with its poverty-stricken inmates, was hateful to him. The transition was too abrupt, the contrast too complete, not to act as a powerful stimulant, to force the growth of his ambition beyond measure. On the one hand, fresh and charming pictures of social life at its most civilized presented themselves, young and lively people, faces full of poetry and passion, in a setting provided by the marvelous creations of art and luxury. On the other, there were gloomy canvases set in grime, and faces from which the passions had fled, leaving only their mechanisms and the strings that worked the puppets. The precepts that anger had wrung from Madame de Basson when she found herself a woman forsaken, and her fair-seeming offers returned to his memory, and poverty underlined them. Rastignac resolved to open 2 parallel lines of attack on fortune, to lean on knowledge and on love, to be a learned doctor of law and a man of the world. He was still very much a child. These two lines are asymptotes and can never meet. "You are very serious, my Lord Marquis," said Vautrin, throwing him one of the penetrating looks with which this man seemed to read the innermost secrets of the heart. "I'm not in the humor to put up with the fastidiousness from people who call me my Lord Marquis," replied Eugene. "To be really a marquis here, you would need 100,000 livres a year, and a man who lives at the Maison Vauquer is not exactly fortune's darling." Vautrin looked at Rastignac with a half-fatherly, half-sneering air, as if he were saying, "Young cub, I could make just one mouthful of you." Then he replied, "You are miffed, perhaps, because you haven't been successful with the beautiful Comtesse de Ristaud. She has shut her door against me because I said her father ate at our table, cried Rastignac. The guests looked at one another. Old Goriot lowered his eyes and turned away, and began to wipe them. "You threw some snuff in my eye," he said to his neighbor. "Anyone who knows old Goriot shall answer for it to me from now on," said Eugène, looking at the old vermicelli maker's neighbor. "He's worth more than all of us put together. I'm not speaking of the ladies," he added, turning towards Mademoiselle Taillefer. These remarks dumbfounded everybody. Eugène had uttered them in a way which reduced the guests to silence. Only Vautrin said jeeringly, If you are taking old Goriot on your shoulders and making yourself his keeper, you'll need to learn how to use a sword and make yourself a first-rate shot." "I intend to do so," said Eugène. "So are you setting out for the wars today?" "Perhaps I am," replied Eugène. "But that's my own business, and I don't need to give an account of it to anyone, especially as I don't inquire into what other people are doing after dark." Vautrin cast a sinister, sidelong glance at him. "If you don't want to be taken in by puppets, my son, you must go behind the scenes and not peep through holes in the curtain. That's enough," he added as he saw Eugène on the verge of flaring up. "We shall have a few things to say to one another at whatever time you like." A general feeling of depression and gloom settled down on the dinner table. Old Goriot was sunk into the abyss of grief into which the student's exclamation had plunged him, and did not understand that the popular attitude toward him had changed, and that a young man capable of imposing silence on his persecutors had taken up the cudgels on his behalf. "Do you mean to tell us here and now that Monsieur Goriot is the father of a countess?" Madame Vauquer said in a low voice. "And of a baroness, too," replied Rastignac. "That's about all he could be," said Bianchon to Rastignac. "I've had a look at his head. There's only one bump on it, a bump of paternity. He will be an eternal father." Eugène had too much on his mind to laugh at Bianchon's joke. He was anxious to put Madame de Basson's advice to good use, and was considering where and how he could get hold of some money. As he saw the savannas of the world spread out before him, profitless to him now but full of possibilities, he lost himself in anxious calculation. The others finished their meal and went out one after another, leaving him still sitting there, alone except for old Goriot. "Then you have seen my daughter?" said Goriot in a voice shaken with emotion. Eugène, roused from his daydream, took the old man's hand in his, and regarded him with some tenderness, and said, "You are a good and noble man. We will talk about your daughters by and by." He got up without waiting to hear what old Goriot had to say, and went to his room, where he wrote the following letter to his mother. "My dear mother, see if you have not a fresh source of maternal bounty to tap for me. I am in a position to make my fortune immediately, but I need 1,200 francs, and I must have them at all costs. Say nothing of this to my father. He might raise objections, and if I do not get this money, I shall be overwhelmed by such dreadful despair as may lead me to blow my brains out. I will explain everything as soon as I see you, for I shall need to write volumes to make you understand my present situation. I have not been gambling, dear mother. I have no debts. But if you wish to preserve the life you gave me, you must find this sum of money. As a matter of fact, I am going to visit the Vicomtesse de Basson. Who is taking me under her wing. I have to go into fashionable society, and have not a penny to buy clean gloves. I can learn to eat dry bread and drink nothing but water. I can fast if need be, but I cannot do without the tools they cultivate. The wine with in this country. I have made up my mind to dig out my path or stick in the mud forever. I know all the hopes that you have placed in me, and long to fulfill them quickly. My kind mother, sell some of your old jewels. I will soon replace them. I know our family circumstances well enough to appreciate what such a sacrifice means. and you must believe that I do not ask you to make it lightly. I should be a monster if I did. You must see that my appeal is the cry of an overriding necessity. Our whole future depends on this subsidy, which I need to open my campaign, for life in Paris is a perpetual battle. If my aunt's lace has to be sold to make up the sum, tell her that I will send her some much more beautiful before long. The letter continued in the same strain. He wrote to both his sisters asking for their savings. To prevent any mention in the family circle of the sacrifice which he knew they would gladly make, he enlisted their delicacy, touching the chords of honor which are strung so tautly and resound so strongly in young hearts. Nevertheless, when he had written the letters, he felt an involuntary tremor. His heart beat fast and he trembled. Although the pressure of his young ambition urged him on, he knew the spotless nobility of the souls which had grown apart from the world in solitude. He knew what shifts he would put his sisters to, and how greatly their joy would be, with what pleasure they would talk to each other in secret at the bottom of the garden of their beloved brother. His conscience rose like a shining light, and showed them to him counting over their little treasures in secret. He saw them using the malicious talent young girls have for teasing mystery, to send him this money unknown to their parents, essaying their first deceit for a sublimely unselfish end. A sister's heart is a diamond in purity, a well of tenderness, he said to himself. He was ashamed of the letters he had written. How passionate their prayers for him would be, how pure the impulse of their hearts towards heaven, what delight would they not take in their sacrifice for him? What grief would strike his mother's heart if she could not send the whole sum he asked for? This noble affection, these costly sacrifices were to serve him as a ladder to reach Delphine de Nucingen. A few tears, the last grains of incense thrown on the sacred altar of the family, fell from his eyes. He strode up and down his room in an agitation mingled with despair. Old Goriot, seeing him in this state through the half-open door, came in and inquired, "What's the matter, monsieur?" "Oh, my good neighbor, it's just that I am such a son and a brother as you are a father. You have good reason to fear for Countess Anastasie. She is in the power of a certain Monsieur Maxime de Trèves, who will be her ruin." Old Goriot withdrew, stammering something incomprehensible to Eugene. Next day, Rastignac went to the post with his letters. He hesitated until the last moment, but finally threw them into the box, saying, "I shall succeed." These are the words of the gambler, of the great soldier, fearful words which have been the salvation of a few, but the ruin of many. Some days later... Some days later, Eugene called on Madame de Restaud. She was not at home. 3 times he returned, and 3 times he found the door closed against him, although he presented himself at an hour when Count de Maxime de Trèves was not there. The Vicomtesse had been right. The student studied no longer. He went to his lectures to answer to his name, and, having attended his presence, made off. He had persuaded himself, as most students do, that he should postpone his studies until it was time to sit for his examinations. He would let his 2nd and 3rd years' work pile up, and then apply himself to learning law seriously, in one last spurt, at the last moment. This left him free for 15 months to sail the Parisian Ocean and devote all his energies to fishing fortune from it, or to the chase and capture of a prize, a woman who would act as his patroness. He saw Madame de Besson twice during this week, calling on her only when he had seen the Marquis d'Ajuda's carriage drive away. For a few days longer, this distinguished woman, the most romantic figure of the Faubourg Saint-Germain, grasped victory and staved off the marriage of Mademoiselle de Roquefide with the Marquis de 𝐎𝐥𝐝. For these last days, which the fear of losing her happiness made the most rapturous of all, could only bring the catastrophe nearer. The Marquis de 𝐎𝐥𝐝 agreed with the Roquefides in regarding this quarrel and its patching up as favorable to his plans. They hoped that the Madame de Basson would grow accustomed to the idea of the marriage, and in the end would sacrifice her meeting with 𝐎𝐥𝐝 for what she must see as a natural step in a man's career, so that, in spite of the most solemn promises daily renewed, Monsieur de 𝐎𝐥𝐝 was playing a part, and the Vicomtesse willingly let the wool be pulled over her eyes. Instead of heroically jumping from the window, she lets herself be pushed downstairs, said her best friend, the Duchess de Langeais. These last gleams of happiness, however, shone long enough to keep the Viscountess in Paris and serve the interest of her young relative, for whom she had a slightly superstitious affection. Eugene had shown himself full of devotion to her, and sensibility in a situation where women see no pity, no real desire to console in anyone's look, where if a man says something flattering to them, it is with some self-interested motive. As Rastignac was anxious to take his bearings before attempting to board the Maison de Nucingen, he made up his mind to find out all he could about old Goriot's previous history, and he gathered reliable information which may be summed up thus. Before the Revolution, Jean-Joachim Goriot was an ordinary workman employed by a vermicelli maker. He was a skillful and thrifty man, and enterprising enough to buy his employer's business when by chance the latter fell victim to the first upheaval in 1789. He established himself in the Rue de la 𝐿𝐴𝐶ienne, near the Corn Exchange, and had the great good sense to accept the presidency of his section so that his business might have the protection of the most influential person of these dangerous times. This judicious action laid the foundation of his fortune, which he started to build up in the days of the famine, real or artificial, during which the price of grain soared to dizzy heights in Paris. Most people fought to the death for bread at the baker's doors, while others went quietly without any fuss to the grocer's to get hold of Italian paste foods. During this year, Citizen Goriot amassed the capital which later enabled him to carry on his business with all the advantage which a solid backing of money gives to its possessor. He had the luck of all men who have only average ability. His mediocrity was his salvation. Moreover, as his success became known only when it was no longer dangerous to be rich, he excited no one's envy. His dealings in grain seemed to have absorbed all his intelligence. In considering corn or flour or tailings, recognizing their quality and their source, attending to their storage, foreseeing their market price, prophesying the harvest yield, procuring cereals cheaply, laying in a store of them in Sicily and the Ukraine, nobody could touch Goriot. Everyone who watched him carry on his business or explain the laws regulating the exports and imports of grain, elucidating the principles evolved, seizing on the weak points, would have judged him capable of filling a minister's shoes. Patient, active, energetic, unvarying, prompt in dispatch, he had an eagle's eye, anticipated everything, foresaw everything, knew all, hid all. He had a diplomat's power of understanding a situation, the capacity of a soldier on the march for patiently, tirelessly slogging on. Take him from his specialty, from his humble, obscure counting-house, on whose steps he used to linger in his hours of leisure, his shoulders against the door-post, and he became once more the uncouth, slow-witted workman, incapable of following an argument, insensible to all the pleasures of the mind, a man who fell asleep at the play, a Parisian Dolaban, outstanding only in stupidity. Natures such as his are almost all alike. At the heart of almost all of them you find a noble passion. Two engrossing passions had filled the vermicelli maker's heart, had absorbed all his tenderness as the grain business has absorbed all his intelligence. His wife, the only daughter of a rich farmer of La Brie, was first the object of his worshipping admiration, his unbounded love. In her, Goriot had found a delicate yet strong personality, a fine and sensitive nature which contrasted strikingly with his own. If there is one feeling innate in the heart of man, surely it is pride in extending constant protection to a fenceless being throughout life. To this pride add love, and lively gratitude felt by all unspoiled natures for the prime source of their pleasures, and you will understand a host of oddities in human nature. After 7 years of unclouded happiness, Goriot lost his wife in an evil hour. She was by that time beginning to influence him outside the sphere of domestic affection. Perhaps she might have cultivated this heavy, clod-like nature, perhaps awaken him to an apprehension of the world outside of business and of life. But as things were, paternal feeling developed to the point of mania in Goriot. The wealth of affection which death had frustrated was transferred to his 2 daughters, and at first they fully satisfied all his emotional needs, however brilliant the proposals made to him by merchants or farmers anxious to give him their daughters. He remained a determined widower. On this point, his father-in-law, the only man for whom he had some friendship, professed to know that Goriot had sworn not to be unfaithful to his wife, even though she was dead. The men of the Corn Exchange were incapable of understanding this sublime piece of folly. They made jokes about it and gave some ridiculous nicknames to Goriot. The first of them who, fresh from sealing a bargain with wine, took it into his head to call him by it, received a blow on the shoulder that sent him flying head first into the Rue Aublin gutter. Goriot's unreflecting devotion and touchy, easily alarmed protection for his daughters was so well known that one day one of his competitors, who wanted to make him leave the exchange in order to have the field to himself, told him that Delphine had just been knocked down by a cab. The vermicelli maker, his face ghastly pale, left the exchange at once. He was ill for several days as a result of the shock of this false alarm and the reaction from it. If he did not make this man feel the weight of his murderous fist, he yet drove him from the Corn Exchange, forcing him into bankruptcy at a crisis in his affairs. Naturally, his 2 daughters were spoiled. Their education was not subject to the dictates of common sense. Goriot was worth more than 60,000 francs a year and spent barely 1,200 on himself. His sole pleasure was to gratify his daughters' whims. The best masters were engaged to endow them with the accomplishments which are the hallmark of a good education. They had a chaperone. Luckily for them, she was a woman of intelligence and good taste. They rode. They kept the carriage. They lived like the mistresses of a rich old lord. They had only to express a wish for something, however costly, to see their father rush to give it to them, and he asked nothing in return but a kiss. Goriot raised his daughters to the rank of angels, and so of necessity above himself, poor man. He even loved them for the pain they caused him. When the two girls were of an age to marry, they were free to choose their husbands according to their taste. Each was to have as dowry the half of her father's fortune. Anastasie, who was courted for her beauty by the Comte de Restaud, had aristocratic aspirations which led her to leave her father's house for an exalted social sphere. Delphine loved money. She married Nucingen, a banker of German origin who became a baron of the Holy Roman Empire. Goriot remained a vermicelli maker. It soon became a shocking thing to Goriot's son-in-law and daughters that he should continue in business, although this business was his whole life. He stood out against their entreaties for 5 years, and then consented to retire on the money raised by the sale of his business and the profits of those last years. It was this capital which Madame 𝐎𝐥𝐝, when he first came to live in her house, had estimated to bring in 8,000 to 10,000 francs a year. Goriot had buried himself in the boarding house in despair when his daughters were forced by their husbands to refuse not only to have him staying under their roof, but also to allow him to call on them, except in private. This was all the information that could be obtained about old Goriot from a Monsieur Muret, who had bought his business. The suppositions that Rastignac had heard the Duchesse de Langeais make were thus confirmed. So ends the prologue of this obscure but terrible Parisian tragedy. Toward the end of the first week in December, Rastignac received 2 letters, one from his mother, the other from his elder sister. The familiar handwriting made his heart leap with joy, and yet he felt the thrill of apprehension. These 2 fragile sheets of paper pronounced a sentence of life or death on his hopes. He entertained some misgivings when he remembered his parents' poverty, yet he had too much experience of their fondness for him not to fear that they had shed the last drops of their lifeblood. His mother's letter ran as follows: My dear child, I am sending you what you asked me for. Make good use of this money. If it were to save your life, I could not find so large a sum again without telling your father of it, and it would make trouble here. You should be obliged to mortgage our land. We should be obliged to mortgage our land to obtain it. It is impossible for me to judge the merits of plans I do not know, but of what kind they can be that make you afraid to confide in me about them. An explanation did not need volumes. A word is enough for a mother, and it would have spared me the anguish of uncertainty. I cannot conceal from you the painful impressions your letter made on me, my dear son. What feeling forced you to strike such dismay into my heart? You must have suffered greatly in writing, to make me suffer so greatly at reading what you wrote. On what enterprise are you embarking? As your life, your happiness, to be pledged to make you appear what you are not, to let you see a world into which you could not go without an expenditure of money, which you cannot sustain without a loss of time precious for your studies? My good Eugene, believe your mother's heart. Devious paths never lead to anything great. Patience and resignation must be the virtues of young men in your position. I am not scolding you. I do not want to tinge our gift with bitterness. I speak as a mother, as full of trust in you as she is watching for you. If you know to what you are committed, I know too how pure your heart is and how excellent your intentions, and so I can say to you without fear, go ahead, my darling. I tremble because I am a mother, but every step you make will be with our good wishes and our blessings. Be careful, dear child. You must use a man's wisdom. The destinies of 5 persons dear to you lie on your shoulders. Yes, all our fortunes is bound up in you, and your success is ours. We all pray to God to help you in everything you do. Your aunt, Masalak, has been of unheard of goodness in this matter. She knew at once how things must be, even to what you tell me about your gloves. But I have a weakness for the eldest child. She said to me gaily, Eugene, you must love your aunt dearly. I shall not tell you what she has done for you until you have succeeded, otherwise her money would burn your fingers. You children do not know what it means to sacrifice the things that are a part of one's memories. But what would we not sacrifice for you? She charges me to send you a kiss on your forehead from her, and would like the kiss to bring you plenty of good fortune. The dear, kind woman would have written to you herself, but she has gout in her fingers. Your father is well. The 1819 harvest is better than we expected. Goodbye, dear child. I shall not say anything about your sisters. Laura is writing to you, and I shall let her have the pleasure of gossiping about the little family happenings. Heaven send you success. Oh, yes, you must succeed, Eugene. You have made me know a pain too poignant for me to bear again. I have known what it is to be poor and want wealth to give my child. Well, now, goodbye. Do not leave us without news. And now take the kiss your mother sends you. When Eugene had finished this letter, he was in tears. He thought of old Goriot breaking up his silver plate and selling it to pay his daughter's bill of exchange. Your mother has broken up her jewels, he said to himself. Your aunt must have wept as she sold some of her keepsakes. What right have you to condemn Anastasie? You have just done selfishly for your own future what she did for her lover. Which is the better, she or you? The student felt himself gnawed within by a sensation of intolerable heat. He wanted to renounce the world. He wanted to refuse the money. He experienced that noble-spirited secret remorse whose merit is rarely appreciated by men when they judge their fellows, which often makes the angels in heaven absolve the criminal condemned by earthly justice. He opened his sister's letter. Its innocence and sweetness fell like balm upon its heart. Your letter came at just the right moment, dear brother. For Agatha and I wanted to lay out our money so many different ways that we could not make up our minds how to spend it. You have done what the King of Spain's servant did when he dropped his master's watches. You have made us agree. Really and truly, Eugene, we were squabbling all the time about what we should buy first, and we couldn't find a way to do all the things we both wanted. I guess Agatha jumped for joy. Indeed, we were like 2 mad creatures all day, to such a fantastic degree, to use aunt's expression, that mother said to us in her severest manner, "What is the matter with you young ladies?" If we had been scolded a little, we should have been still better pleased, I believe. A woman must find great satisfaction in suffering for the person she loves. But I was vexed and sorrowful in the midst of my joy. I shall certainly make a bad wife. I am a dreadful spendthrift. I bought myself 2 sashes and a pretty stiletto to pierce the eyelets of my bodices, silly odds and ends. I didn't want, so that I had less money than that great Agatha, who is thrifty and hoards her pennies like a magpie. She has 200 francs, and I, my poor boy, have only 150. I am well punished for it. I should like to throw my sash down the well. I shall always hate wearing it because it has robbed you. Agatha was a dear about it. She said, "Let's send the 350 francs from us both." But I couldn't help telling you just how things happened. Do you know how we set about obeying your commands? We took our lovely money and went out for a walk together, and as soon as we had reached the main road, ran hot foot to Ruffec, where we had just handed the money over to Monsieur Grimber and the Messageries Royale. We were as light as swallows coming back. Does happiness give us wings? Agatha asked me. We told each other 1,000 things, which I shall not repeat to you, Monsieur le Parisien, for they were all about you. Oh, dear brother, we love you dearly. That is the whole thing in a nutshell. As for keeping this secret, according to Aunt, little monkeys like us are capable of anything, even of holding our tongues. Mother has gone on a mysterious errand to Angoulême with Aunt, and they both kept silent about the high politics of their journey, which was not embarked on without long conference beforehand, from which we were shut out. And Monsieur le Baron, too. Great schemes are afoot in the state of Rastignac. The muslin dress, sprigged with open-work flowers which the infants are embroidering, are Her Majesty the Queen's progresses in the profoundest secrecy. There are only 2 more breadths to do, and it has been decided not to build a wall along the Vertueux. There is to be a hedge instead. Our people will lose fruit and espaliers by it, but strangers will gain a fine view. If their heir presumptive needs handkerchiefs, he is thereby given notice that the Dowager de Marsillac, rummaging through her treasures and her trunks, known as Herculaneum and Pompeii, discovered a piece of cambric which she didn't know she had. The Princess Agatha and Laura put at his command their thread, needles and hands which, alas, are always a little too red. The two young princes, Don Henry and Don Gabriel, are still sadly in the habit of gorging themselves with grape jam, plaguing their sisters, not wanting to learn anything, amusing themselves by robbing birds' nests, kicking up a rumpus, and cutting osiers in defiance of the state laws, to make themselves switches. The papal nuncio, commonly called Monsieur le Curé, threatens to excommunicate them if they continue to neglect their sacred canons of grammar for the martial canons of the hollow elder tree. Goodbye, dear brother. Never did a letter carry so many good wishes for your success, or so much happily satisfied love. You will have lots of things to tell us when you come home. You must tell me everything, because I'm the eldest. Aunt gave us grounds for suspecting that you had some social successes. They speak of a lady, and then they are dumb. Of course they are, as far as we are concerned. By the way, Eugene, if you like, instead of handkerchiefs, we could make you some shirts. Give me an answer soon about this. If you need good shirts, well made at once, we ought to set to work without delay. And if there are fashions in Paris which we don't know, you should send us a pattern, especially for the cuffs. Goodbye, goodbye. I send you a kiss for your forehead, on the left side, on the temple which belongs exclusively to me. I am leaving the other side of the page for Agatha, and she has promised not to read what I have written, but to make quite sure of it, I'm going to stay beside her while she writes. Your loving sister, Laura de Rastignac. Oh, yes, said Eugene to himself. Whatever it costs, I must succeed now. A treasury of gold could not repay devotion such as this. I wish I could heap every kind of happiness on them. 1,550 francs. He went out. After a pause, I must make every penny tell. Laura is right. Trust a woman. I have no fine shirts. Where someone else's welfare is concerned, a girl is as wide awake as a card shaper. a card sharper, guileless in what concerns herself and full of foresight for me. She is like the angel in heaven who pardons earthly faults with no comprehension of them. The world was his. Already his tailor had been summoned, sounded, and subjugated. One glance at Monsieur de Tralles had made Rastignac realize the influences that tailors exercise in young men's lives. No mean exists, alas, between the two extremes. A tailor, by the mere fact of his business relation, becomes either a mortal enemy or a devoted friend. In his tailor, Eugene met a man who understood the paternal obligations of his office, and considered himself as a connecting link between a young man's present and his future. And Rastignac, in gratitude, made the fortune of this man by one of the epigrams in which he later in life excelled. "I know 2 pairs of his trousers," he said, "which have made matches worth 20,000 livres a year. 1,500 francs in clothes ad lib." At that moment, the poor son of the South no longer had any doubts about anything, and went down to breakfast with that indefinable air which possession of any sum of money gives a young man. Immediately, money slides into a student's pocket he feels. Immediately, money slides into a student's pocket he feels, in fancy, a pillar rise within him to give him moral support. He strides out more manfully than before. He feels he has found a place to stand from, which he can apply his lever to the world. He looks you straight in the face, and his movements are vigorous and determined. Yesterday, he was shy and self-effacing, ready to take rough treatment from anybody. Today, he would stand up to a prime minister. Amazing changes take place within him. Nothing is beyond his ambition, and nothing beyond his reach. He sets his fancy on this or that at random. He is gay, generous, and expensive. In short, the fledgling bird has found he can use his wings. A penniless student snatches a crumb for pleasure like a dog snapping up a bone amidst a host of dangers, who crunches it as he flies from the pursuit, sucks the marrow, and runs on again. But the young man who can jingle a few fleeting coins in his pocket savors the full flavor of his pleasures, tastes them drop by drop, and turns them on his tongue. He floats above the earth. The world poverty for him no longer holds a meaning. The whole of Paris is his. Those are the days when the whole world is radiant with delight, and everything sparkles and flames. Days of joyous energy which no man, no woman either, can harness for gain. Days of debts and lively apprehensions which give a 10 times sharper edge to all the pleasures. The man who does not know the left bank of the Seine, between the Rue Saint-Jacques and the Rue de Saint-Péry, knows nothing of life. Ah, if the women of Paris only knew, Eugene told himself, as if the women of Paris only knew, Eugene told himself, as he ate the stewed pears at a farthing each served by Madame Beaucaire. They would come here to find a lover. Just then, the wicket gate bell rang, and a messenger from the Messageries Royales appeared at the dining room door. He asked for Monsieur Eugene de Renestan, and handed him 2 bags and a receipt to sign. Thereupon, Eugene was searched by an unfathomable look from Vautrin, which stung him like a lash. "Now you can pay for fencing lessons and shooting practice," the man said. "Your ship has come home," said Madame Beaucaire, eyeing the bags. Mademoiselle 𝐎𝐥𝐝 did not dare glance at the money for fear of showing her greed in her eyes. "You have a good mother," said Madame Couture. "You have a good mother, sir," echoed Poirier. "Yes, Mama has been bled white," said Vautrin. "So now you can sow your wild oats, go out in society and fish for heiresses and dance with countesses with peach blossoms in their hair. But take my advice, young man. Practice shooting." And Vautrin aimed an imaginary gun at an adversary. Rastignac wanted to tip the messenger, but found his pockets empty. Vautrin fumbled in his and threw a franc to the man. "Your credit is good," he said, looking at the student. Rastignac was forced to thank him, although since the sharp words they had exchanged at dinner on the day he had visited Madame de Basson, he could not endure this man. For a week, Eugene and Vautrin had been silent when both were present, and had closely observed each other. The student asked himself why. In vain. Unquestionably, ideas are projected with a force in direct proportion to the force with which they are conceived, and fly straight to the mark at which the brain aims at, by a mathematical law as exact as that which directs the course of shells projected from a mortar. The effects produced are various. There are tender natures in which they lodge with devastating results, and there are strongly fortified natures, brazen-fronted skulls, against which the wills of others flatten themselves and fall like bullets against the wall. Then there are doughy, yielding brains in which other men's ideas are spent, as shot is killed in the soft earth of redoubts. Rastignac's was a head stuffed with gunpowder, ready to explode at the slightest shock. He was too young and quick not to be vulnerable to the projection of ideas the influence of others' feelings, whose results strike us as so strange and startling when we are ignorant of their cause. His mental vision had the clearness and range of his physical eyes, which were as keen as a lynx's. All his mental powers were perception, corresponding to his physical powers, had the mysterious extension, the power of flexible thrust and recovery, which makes us marvel at men of superior intellect, who are like fencers, skilled in finding the chink in any armor. During this last month, moreover, Eugene's good qualities and his weaknesses had developed rapidly. Contact with the world and the attempt to satisfy his growing desire had been a forcing frame for his weaknesses. His good qualities included that southern impetuosity which drives headlong at a difficulty, and which allows no man from beyond the law to remain long in any uncertainty whatsoever. Northerners call this quality a weakness, and they point out that if Muret made his fortune by it, he also came by his death. From this we may conclude that when a southerner can add the guile of the north to the dash and daring of the south side of the Loire, he is a man complete, and, like Bernadotte, may win and keep the crown of Sweden. So, Rastignac could not long remain under fire from Vautrin's batteries without knowing if this man was his enemy or his friend. It seemed to him that this strange being examined his feelings every moment and read his inmost heart, while Vautrin himself was so closely sealed that he seemed to possess the still depths of a sphinx, and knows all, sees all, and keeps silent. With his self-confidence bred of full pockets, Eugene was ready to rebel. "Be so good as to wait a moment," he said to Vautrin, who was rising to go out after enjoying his last mouthfuls of coffee. "What for?" replied the older man, putting on his wide-brimmed hat. and taking up the sword cane, which he had accustomed to flourishing like a man defying attack from 4 thieves at once. "I want to repay you," said Eugene, promptly undoing one of his bags and counting out 140 francs for Madame Vacher. "Short reckonings make good friends," he said, turning to the widow. "That clears our accounts until Saint Sylvester. Can you give me change for this 5-franc piece?" "Good friends make short reckonings," repeated Poirier, looking at Vautrin. "Here is a franc," said Rastignac, holding out a coin to the Sphinx in the black wig. "Anyone would think you were afraid to owe me a trifle," exclaimed Vautrin, his eyes probing the young man's very soul, and on his lips one of those cynical, jeering smiles which had provoked Eugene 100 times to the point of fury. "Well, yes, so I am," rejoined the student, who was grasping his 2 bags and had risen to go to his room. Vautrin went out by the door to the drawing-room, and the student prepared to leave by the other door, leading to the staircase. "Do you know, Monsieur le Marquis de Rastignac-Corama, what you are saying to me is not exactly polite," said Vautrin then, flicking the drawing-room door shut and striding up to the student, who stared at him coldly. Rastignac closed the dining-room door and drew Vautrin with him to the foot of the staircase. As they stood there in the passage between the dining-room and the kitchen, below the iron-barred glass panel over the door which led to the garden, Sylvie appeared from her kitchen. "Mr. Vautrin, I am not a marquis, and my name is not Rastignac-Corama," the student said. "They are going to fight," said Mademoiselle Marqueneux indifferently. "Fight!" echoed Poirier. "Oh, no, not at all," replied Madame Vacher, stroking her heap of coins lovingly. "But they are going under the trees," cried Mademoiselle Victorine, rising to look out from her into the garden. "The poor young man is in the right all the same." "Come upstairs, my dear child," said Madame 𝐎𝐥𝐝. "These things are no business of ours." But as Madame 𝐎𝐥𝐿 and Victorine rose, fat Sylvie appeared in the doorway and blocked their way. "Whatever are they up to?" she said. "Monsieur Vautrin said to Monsieur Eugene, 'Let us lay our cards on the table.' He said. Then he took him by the arm, and now they're tramping about among our artichokes." As she was speaking, Vautrin came in. "Don't be frightened, Ma Vacher," he said, smiling. "I'm going to try my pistols under the lime trees." "Oh, sir," said Victorine, clasping her hands, "why do you want to kill Monsieur Eugene?" Victorine took 2 steps backwards and stared at Victorine. "Ha ha, here's something new," he exclaimed in a mocking voice that made the poor girl blush. "That's a nice young fellow out there, don't you think? You've put a notion in my head," he went on. "I'll make you both happy, my fair maid." Madame 𝐎𝐥𝐿 took her ward's arm and hurried her off, saying in her ears as they went, "Really, Victorine, I'm amazed at you this morning." "I don't want anyone firing shots in my garden," said Madame Vacher. "Do you want to frighten all the neighbors and bring the police about our ears at this time of day?" Come, don't upset yourself, Ma," said Vautrin. There, make your mind easy. We'll go to the shooting gallery." He rejoined Rastignac and took him familiarly by the elbow. "If I prove to you that at 35 paces I can put my bullet through the pip in the ace of spades 5 times in successions, even that wouldn't doubt your ardor, I suppose. You strike me as being rather a hot-headed young man, and you would get yourself killed like an idiot." "You're backing out," said Eugene. "Don't get my dander up," replied Vautrin. "It isn't cold this morning. We'll go and sit over there." and he pointed to the green-painted seats. "No one will overhear us. I have a few things to say to you. Now you are a good little man, and I don't wish you ill. As sure as my name is Cheat, good God, Vautrin, I have a liking for you. Why I like you, you shall hear. Meantime, I can tell you that I know you as well as if I had made you myself, and I'm going to prove it to you. Put your bags down there," he went on, pointing to the round table. Rastignac put his money on the table and sat down with the liveliest expectation. He was consumed with curiosity, which had been raised to the highest pitch by the change in the manner of this man, who had first talked of killing him and was now posing as his protector. "You would very much like to know who I am, what my past history is, and what I'm doing now," went on Vautrin. "You are too curious, little man. Come, keep cool. You are going to hear more surprising things than that. I have had my misfortunes. Listen to me first, and then you can talk afterwards. Here is my past life in 3 words. Who am I? Vautrin. What am I doing? What I please. So much for that. Would you like to know my nature? I am good to those who are good to me, or whose heart speaks to mine. Those people can treat me as they like. They can kick me on the shins and I won't even say, 'Take care.' But, by heaven, I'm as vicious as the devil with people if they annoy me, or if I don't take to them. And it is just as well that you should know that killing a man means as little to me as that." And he spat. "But I make a point in killing him decently, and only when it's absolutely necessary. I am what you might call an artist, such as you see me. I have read the memoirs of Benvenuto Cellini, and in Italian, too. He was a rare sportsman, and he taught me to follow the examples set by Providence, who kills us right and left haphazard, and also to love beauty wherever it is to be found. Isn't it a fine game to play, after all, to be alone against mankind and have luck on your side? I have thought a great deal about the present constitution of our social disorder. My dear little fellow, dueling is a game for children. It's downright folly. When, of 2 living men, one must leave the stage, it's lunatic to leave it to chance. A duel is a toss-up, that's all. See here, I can put 5 successive shots through the middle of an ace of spades, one on top of the other. And at 35 paces, too. When a chap has a little trick up his sleeve, he may feel sure of killing his man. Well, I shot a man at 20 paces and I missed him. The fellow had never handled a pistol in his life. Look at this," said the extraordinary man, undoing his waistcoat and displaying a chest as shaggy as a man's beard. The reddish, coarse hair aroused a sort of horror mixed with disgust in Eugene. "That green hair singed my fur," he went on, guiding Rastignac's finger to a deep scar in his breast. "But I was a child then. I was your age, 21. I still had some beliefs left in a woman's love. A pack of nonsense that you'll get mixed up with soon enough. You would have fought me, would you? You might have managed to kill me. Suppose me buried, and where would you be then? You would have to clear out, go to Switzerland, squander Papa's money, although he has little enough for himself. I am going to open your eyes, to show you your position as it is, and I'm going to do it as a man who can see clearer than you, who has examined things here below and seen that there are only 2 courses to follow: stupid obedience or revolt. I obey in nothing. Is that clear? Do you know how much you'll need in the direction you are going? 1 million at once. Without it, we might as well go and cool our hot little head in the drag nest of St. Cloud to find out if there's a God. I will give you that $1,000,000. He paused and looked at Eugene. Ha ha, you look more kindly now on your little papavatrin. When you hear that, you're like a girl to whom someone has said, I'll see you this evening, and who licks her lips like a cat lapping milk as she sprinks herself before the mirror. Well and good. Now you can get down to brass tacks, you and I. Here is your balance sheet, young man. We have yonder papa, mama, great-aunt, 2 sisters, 18 and 17 years old, 2 little brothers, 15 and 10. That's the muster roll of the crew. The aunt brings up your sisters. The curé comes to teach the 2 brothers Latin. The family eats more chestnut soup than white bread. Papa takes care not to wear out his trousers. If Mama has a dress for the summer and one for the winter, that's about all she has. Our sisters make do the best they can. I know all about it. I have lived in the South. That's how things are at home if they send you 1,200 francs a year and your little estate brings in only 3,000. We have a cook and a manservant, for Papa is a baron and we must keep up appearances. As for us, we are ambitious. We are connected with the Bassons. We go on foot. We want to be rich and haven't got a halfpenny. We eat Montvanquer's messes and have a taste for the fine dinners of the Faubourg Saint-Germain. We sleep on a pallet and long for a mansion. I don't blame you for wanting these things. To have ambition, my bright lad, is not given to everyone. Ask women what kind of men they run after. Ambitious men is the answer. The backs of the ambitious are stronger, their blood more rich in iron, their hearts warmer than those of other men. And a woman knows herself so happy and so lovely in the hours when she is strong, that she prefers above all men the man whose strength is enormous, even though it might mean her destruction. I'm listing your ambitions to put the question that faces you before you squarely. And here is the question. We're as hungry as a wolf, our little teeth are sharp. How shall we set about providing for the pot? We have the code to swallow first. It's not amusing, it teaches us nothing, but it has to be done. So far so good. We make ourselves a lawyer with a view of becoming president of the Agnès court, in order to send poor devils who are better men than we are to the galleys with TF branded on their shoulders, so that the rich may be shown that they can sleep in peace. It's not amusing, but then it takes a long time. First, 2 years drudgery in Paris, looking at the goodies we're greedy for but never laying hands on them. It's tiresome to keep on wanting things and never having them. If you were an anemic, slug-like creature, there would be nothing to fear. But we have the feverish blood of lions in our veins and an appetite for 20 foolhardy acts a day. So you will succumb to this torture, the ghastliest form of torture we know of in God's hell. But suppose you are a good boy, and bemoan your troubles over a glass of milk. Then, gallant fellow that you are, after plenty of troubles and hardships enough to drive a dog mad, you will have to begin by becoming deputy of some rascal in a hole in a town where the governments will fling you 1,000 francs a year, like scraps to a butcher's dog. Bark after thieves, plead the cause of the rich, send high-spirited folk to the guillotine. Thanks a lot. If you have no influence, you will rot in your provincial court. At the age of 30, you will be a justice at 1,200 francs a year. If you haven't thrown your gown to the nettles before then, when you reach 40, you will marry some miller's daughter, worth about 6,000 louis a year. Thanks again. With the help of influence, you will be the public prosecutor at 30. with a salary of 3,000 francs, and will marry the mayor's daughter. If you stoop to a few petty political dirty tricks, such as reading Vieille for Manuel on a bulletin, the names rhyme. So that sets one conscience at rest. At 40, you'll probably be an attorney general, and may make a deputy. Now, my dear young friend, that we shall have... Note, my dear young friend, that we shall have robbed a certain amount of bloom off our little conscience, that we shall have had 20 years of tiresome worries and secret wretchedness, and that our sisters will be old maids. I have the honor to point out to you, moreover, that there are only 20 attorney generals in France, and that your aspirants to that rank are 20,000 strong, among whom are rascals who would sell their families to climb one rung. If that sort of thing disgusts you, let's look at something else. Does the Baron de Rastignac think of becoming an advocate? Oh, excellent! He must slave for 10 years, live at a rate of 1,000 francs a month, have a library and chambers, go into society, go down on his knees before a solicitor for briefs, sweep the floor at the Palais de Justice with his tongue. If you led to anything good, I should say no. But show me 5 advocates in Paris who earn more than 50,000 francs a year at 50. Ha! Sooner than shrivel my soul like that, I would turn pirate. Moreover, where would you find the cash? That question is no joke. We have one resource in a wife's dowry. Do you feel like marrying? That will put a millstone around your neck. And then if you marry for money, what becomes of our notions of honor, our fine feelings? We might as well begin your revolt against human conventions today. It would be nothing to grovel. It would be nothing to grovel like a snake before a wife, to lick her mother's feet, commit vile acts that would disgust a sow. Ugh. If you at least found happiness, but you would be as wretched as a stone of a gutter with a wife whom you married on those terms. It's a much better thing to fight men than to bicker with one's wife. There are the crossroads of life, young man. Choose. In fact, you have already chosen. You went to your cousin, de Basson's house, and sniffed the sweet odor of luxury there. You went to Madame de Brestow's, old Goriot's daughter, and there became conscious of the Parisian woman. That day you came back with one word written on your forehead, and I know well how to read it. It was success. Success at any price. Bravo, I said. Here's a fine fellow who suits me well. You needed money. Where were you to get it? You bled your sisters. All brothers sponge on their sisters more or less. Your 1,500 francs, squeezed out God knows how, in a country where chestnuts are more plentiful than 5-franc pieces, will slip away like soldiers on a raid. And then what will you do? Will you work? Work, or what you understand by work at this moment, leads in old age to a room in Maman Vauquer's boarding house for men of Poirier's caliber. 50,000 young men at this very moment are in your position and are racking their brains to find a quick road to success. There are as many of you as that. You may judge of the efforts you must make and the bitterness of the struggle. You must devour each other like spiders in a pot. Seeing there are not 50,000 good positions for you. Do you know how a man makes his way here? By the brilliance of genius or the cunning use of corruption. You must cut a path through this mess of men like a cannonball, or sweep among them like a pestilence. Honesty is of no avail. Men give way before the power of genius. They hate it and try and blow upon it because it takes without sharing the plunder, but they give way if it persists. In short, They worship it on their knees when they have failed in their efforts to bury it under the mud. Corruption is powerful in the world. Talent is scarce. So corruption is the instrument of swarming mediocrity, and you will feel its point everywhere. You will see wives whose husbands have 6,000 francs a year, all told, spend more than 10,000 francs on dress. You will see officials with a salary of 1,200 francs buy estates. You will see women sell themselves to enter the carriage of the son of a peer of France who can spin to Longchamps in the middle carriageway. You have seen that poor simpleton, old Goriot, obliged to meet the bill of exchange endorsed by his daughters, whose husband has an income of 50,000 francs a year. I defy you to walk 2 steps in Paris without encountering hellishly underhand dealings. I would bet my head against the head of that salad that you'll stir up a wasp's nest in the first woman you admire, be she rich, beautiful, and young. They are all law dodgers, all at loggerheads with their husbands about everything. I should go on forever if I had to describe the deals that are made for lovers, finery, children, housekeeping, or for vanity. Rarely for the sake of virtue, you may be sure. So the honest man is the common enemy. But who do you think the honest man may be? In Paris, the honest man is the man who holds his tongue and refuses to share his loot. I'm not speaking of those poor helots who do the work everywhere without any reward for their toil, whom I call the brotherhood of God's almighty duffers. Certainly, virtue is there, in the full flower of its stupidity, but so is poverty. I can see the sour faces of the honest folk if God played us in that ill-mannered trick of being absent on his last day of judgment. Well, then, if you want to make a fortune quickly, you must already be rich, or appear to be so. It's a matter here of playing for high stakes. If you don't, you're trifling. You cut no ice, and goodbye to you. If in the scores of professions you might follow 10 men rise to the top quickly, the public calls them thieves. Draw your own conclusions. That is life in its true colors. It's not much more attractive than the kitchen. It's just as smelly, and you have to dirty your hands if you want to live well. The only thing that matters is to know how to get them clean again. In that art lies the whole morality of our time. If I talk to you like this about the world, it's because it has given me reason to do so. I know it well. Do you think I blame it? Not at all. It has always been like this. Mortalists will never change it. Man is no angel. He is sometimes more of a hypocrite and sometimes less, and then fools say that he has or has not principles. I don't think the rich are any worse than the masses. Men are much the same at the top, the bottom, and in the middle at the social scale. In a million of this herd of human cattle, there are 10 sharp fellows to be found who climb above everything, even above laws. I am one of them. You, if you're above the common herd, go straight forward with your head high. But you will have to fight against envy, slander, mediocrity, against the whole world. Napoleon came up against the minister of war called Aubry, who just failed to send him to the colonies. Sound yourself. See if you will be better to get up every morning with a will more determined than it was the night before. In that case, I'm going to make you an offer that nobody would refuse. Mind what I say. It continues, and we'll continue with it in the next installment of Hurrah from the Underground. Bye.